It becomes very clear when this behavior appears. Beware. It's the mark of a true narcissist. Have you ever paused and wondered if there might be a quick, reliable way to tell if someone is a narcissist? Perhaps it's a boss whose praise seems intoxicating yet hollow, a coworker whose charm masks manipulation, someone you've only just met, or even a person you've cared about deeply for years. Psychologists warn that the earlier you identify narcissistic traits, the better you can protect yourself, because allowing them to embed themselves in your life unchecked often leads to years of chronic stress, manipulation, and emotional abuse. The human brain, wired to seek social connection and respond to charm, can easily fall prey to these patterns, which is why spotting a narcissist early is not just helpful, it's essential. If you're empathetic, generous, and deeply invested in the well-being of others, you are precisely the type of person a narcissist targets. Research in social psychology indicates that narcissists instinctively gravitate toward those with high emotional intelligence and empathy, not because they value these qualities, but because they can exploit them. Over the past 2 decades, I've studied the interplay between self-worth and narcissistic relationships, and as both a coach and someone who has lived through this, I've seen firsthand the psychological havoc they can wreak. Narcissistic manipulation doesn't just erode confidence. It subtly rewires your perception of trust and reality, leaving long-term imprints on your emotional landscape. So how do you protect yourself? One of the most effective approaches is a simple behavioral test that anyone can use in any setting, whether in the workplace, at a social gathering, or within family dynamics. Psychologists describe these tests as practical assessments of boundaries and behavioral responses. They reveal how a narcissist responds when their control is challenged. Narcissists rarely present themselves with clear warning signs. Instead, they arrive cloaked in charm, exuding confidence, or inserting themselves into crises that tug at your empathy. According to clinical experts, this deliberate positioning taps into your natural inclination to nurture and help, making you an immediate target. Imagine yourself at a dinner party, a work function, or a family gathering. You are searching for connection, hoping to feel seen, safe, and included. You might feel a bit uncertain about yourself or drawn towards someone who appears effortlessly magnetic. Now, consider the narcissist's perspective. They are not here for connection. Psychologists describe them as predators in the social landscape, scanning the crowd, assessing vulnerabilities, and calculating who can provide the most narcissistic supply. Their aim is not friendship or collaboration, but to extract attention, admiration, or emotional energy. They thrive on it. It sustains the inflated self-image that is fragile beneath the surface. What exactly is this supply, and why does it matter so deeply? It can manifest as praise, sympathy, dramatic reactions, or even a sense of dominance over another person. Psychologists note that this constant need for external validation is driven by an unstable self-concept. Narcissists lack internal cohesion and rely on the energy and approval of others to reinforce the fantasy of their greatness. Without it, they experience psychological destabilization, akin to emotional starvation. They are, in effect, perpetually hunting. Every room becomes a landscape of opportunity, every individual a potential source, and every interaction a test of whether they can extract what they need to survive. They accomplish this by probing boundaries, often 3 primary types: time, attention, and energy. To a narcissist, these boundaries are not respected as personal limits. They are resources to be seized. Psychologists emphasize that narcissists treat people as extensions of themselves, instruments to satisfy needs rather than autonomous beings. Conceptually, boundaries are like fences surrounding your home. They demarcate what is yours and what is not. When a narcissist disregards these lines, they are not merely being rude or selfish. They are testing for compliance, attempting to see how far they can bend your behavior to feed their own sense of control. For anyone seeking to assess their vulnerability, psychologists recommend practical tools such as a narcissist protection checklist, which I've developed and made available. It allows you to evaluate the level of risk and identify early warning signs, empowering you to act before manipulative patterns take hold. In the psychological literature, these types of proactive measures are shown to significantly reduce the long-term impact of narcissistic engagement, providing both insight and a tangible sense of agency. The key is awareness. The moment you understand how narcissists operate, You reclaim control over your energy, your time, and your emotional well-being, creating space for genuine connection instead of exploitation. A narcissist's world revolves around testing and control, and psychologists describe this behavior as a continuous probing for vulnerabilities. They are always observing, always experimenting, attempting to discern whether they can push a button and bend your behavior to their will. Consider the way they test your time boundaries. They wait for a moment when you've asserted a small boundary. Maybe you mention you're leaving for the evening, planning to go to bed early, or taking some well-earned time off. At that precise moment, the narcissist begins to apply subtle pressure, guilt-laden remarks, excuses, or barely perceptible passive aggression, while meticulously watching how you respond. As Dr. Craig Malkin, a clinical psychologist and expert on narcissism, notes, this is not about curiosity or poor social awareness. It is a deliberate strategy to determine whether they can manipulate the rhythm of your life. Your words, no matter how firm, are irrelevant. What they scrutinize is your action. If you postpone your plans, rearrange your schedule, or succumb to guilt, you teach them something critical. Your time is theirs to command, and they have power over it. The way they test your attention mirrors this pattern, but it is psychologically even more invasive. Narcissists are attuned to subtle human cues and thrive on diverting your focus from what matters to you toward what benefits them. Psychologists describe this as a form of attentional hijacking, a deliberate interference that forces the victim into a reactive state. They strike when you are already engaged in something meaningful, whether that's a conversation, a task, reading, watching, or simply thinking. A text arrives demanding an immediate reply. A call comes when your hands are full, or they may appear in person unannounced, expecting you to stop everything for them. Some may intrude upon a conversation, stand in your line of sight, or speak over you to reclaim your focus. The crucial psychological impact here is that each successful disruption reinforces their sense of control, and each capitulation teaches them that your attention is malleable. Once they succeed studies show that this behavior escalates, becoming more frequent and insidious because their brain interprets compliance as reinforcement, much like a reward circuit being activated. Testing your energy boundaries is yet another layer of psychological manipulation, and it is often the most emotionally exhausting. Psychologists emphasize that this form of boundary violation operates as a drain and observe technique. The narcissist may feign forgetfulness, act helpless, or bait you with drama, all with surgical precision. They create a scenario designed to evoke guilt, conflict, or pity, and then watch how swiftly and thoroughly you intervene. The underlying psychological mechanism is fascinating. They are not seeking genuine help or connection. Rather, they are performing an experiment to determine how much emotional labor you will surrender. If you step in, calm them, explain their emotions, or carry their burden, they instantly recognize you as a reliable source, a reservoir of energy to exploit. According to Dr. Wendy Behari, a psychotherapist specializing in narcissistic personality disorder, this learned response strengthens the narcissist's internal narrative of omnipotence and teaches them they can repeatedly manipulate you without resistance. Protecting yourself from these tests requires a nuanced understanding of behavior over words. The critical insight, emphasized by leading psychologists, is that saying no is insufficient unless your actions reinforce that refusal. Your behavior must align seamlessly with your verbal boundaries. You assert your position, maintain it, and then observe. The violation itself does not reveal the true nature of the person. Context and intention do. Individuals who have experienced trauma, live with neurodivergence, or have strong people-pleasing tendencies may occasionally overstep boundaries, but their aim is connection, even if clumsy. Others may express surprise or disappointment but adjust and respect your limits. A narcissist, however, operates with a different psychological blueprint. You will notice subtle cues: a flicker of irritation, a smirk that immediately vanishes, a sudden edge in tone, sarcasm, guilt, or even oppressive silence. These are not innocent reactions. They are signals that power is being tested. The psychological truth is stark. When a narcissist crosses a boundary, it is never about the boundary itself. It is about assessing whether they can bend your behavior to suit their needs, to dominate and win. When they do not succeed immediately, they escalate, pushing harder to achieve compliance. Psychologists point out that this pattern of testing, escalation, and reinforcement is what differentiates narcissistic behavior from ordinary boundary testing or social missteps. It is methodical, conscious, and aimed at exploitation. And if they succeed even once, you can be certain they will return, viewing that moment of compliance as an open invitation to probe, test, and extract again. Recognizing this dynamic and responding with consistent, non-negotiable behavioral boundaries is one of the most powerful ways to reclaim your autonomy, protect your emotional resources, and begin to shield yourself from their manipulative strategies. Imagine the scene. Your day is over, your mind is shifting toward rest or personal time, and you've made it clear that you are done. You are packing up, moving toward the door, and suddenly, someone, the person you've been trying to assess, stops you with a seemingly innocuous request. Wait, before you go, can you help me with one quick thing? At first glance, this may appear ordinary. Not everyone who interrupts has hidden motives. Psychologists like Dr. Craig Malkin note that narcissistic behavior is defined not by a single act but by a consistent pattern of testing and manipulation. The distinction lies in intention. While some people clumsily ask for help, the narcissist is observing, probing, and gauging whether your boundaries will bend. The critical skill for the potential victim is selective, conscious refusal, not rigid denial to every request, but a measured no backed by action. You respond by affirming your boundary behaviorally, "I've got to go," or "I have an appointment," and you follow through. Your boundary is not defined by the words alone. It is etched in your actions. You leave calmly, without negotiating, stalling, or over-explaining. This behavioral no is firm yet measured, a subtle assertion of autonomy that speaks louder than any explanation ever could. Now, observe the narcissist's response. Psychologists describe this as the moment of truth in behavioral boundary testing. If they accept your boundary and move on, it signals a rare encounter with respect. But if their jaw tightens, a flash of disgust crosses their face, or they escalate with comments like, "Seriously, it only takes 2 seconds," or passive-aggressive remarks such as, "Wow, okay, I guess I'll just figure it out myself," they are signaling a power play. Dr. Wendy Behari emphasizes that narcissists rarely act out of simple frustration. These are calculated tests designed to see whether you will yield. In that moment, you must pause and evaluate. Is this person genuinely asking for help, or are they testing your compliance? One isolated incident may be inconsequential, a fleeting expression of irritation or a bad day, but when repeated over time, each push, each subtle guilt tactic, becomes part of a structured attempt to bend your behavior and erode your autonomy. The same principles extend to attention boundaries, which psychologists describe as one of the most vulnerable and easily exploited human resources. Imagine you are deeply engaged, perhaps in a conversation, a meeting, or watching a presentation, when someone interrupts, saying, "Hey, can I ask you something real quick?" Your response, calm and consistent, might be, "Sure, give me a second," while you maintain focus on your original task. This is your behavioral no in action, a clear demonstration that your attention is not negotiable. How they react reveals their intent. If they respect your focus, excellent. If they attempt to hijack your attention, act offended, or talk over you, they are not responding to the context but to your resistance. Psychologists explain that this behavior reflects a narcissist's need to secure what Dr. Malkin terms narcissistic supply, the energy, attention, or emotional reactions they depend upon to reinforce their self-image. Each attempt to override your focus is a test, a subtle measurement of how malleable your attention is to their demands. Energy boundaries are another critical dimension, and they are often tested with psychological sophistication. Picture the end of a Zoom call, where everyone is saying their goodbyes, and suddenly, someone drops a dramatic emotional comment. "Not that anyone really cares, but I cried in the bathroom for an hour this morning." Psychologists recognize this as a classic narcissistic maneuver. Timing is everything. A genuine request for support rarely arrives at the very last possible moment, when no one has the energy to respond effectively. The narcissist is testing your emotional availability, measuring whether you will expend your resources for their gratification. The strategy to protect yourself is deceptively simple but profoundly effective. Do not reopen the conversation. Hold your line politely, perhaps acknowledging them with a nod or a brief, compassionate comment such as, "I'm sorry you're going through that," but then close the interaction as planned. Dr. Carol McBride, an expert in narcissistic abuse recovery, emphasizes that this approach allows you to preserve your emotional energy while reinforcing your behavioral boundaries. The boundary is not in what you say, it is in how you act. If they respect it, the moment ends, the boundary stands, and your autonomy remains intact. If they attempt to pull you in, however, it becomes clear. This is no ordinary interaction, it is a test, and your response will determine whether they perceive you as a compliant source or a person with inviolable limits. Imagine the moment. You've set a clear boundary, your day is done, and yet the person you're observing, the one you suspect may be a narcissist, escalates. They drop into self-pity, double down on their demands, or redirect blame toward you, perhaps with words like, "I knew you wouldn't have time for me now." Psychologists who study narcissistic behavior, such as Dr. Wendy Behari and Dr. Carol McBride, describe this as a deliberate manipulation tactic designed to test the limits of your autonomy. It is not a plea for genuine help or a cry for support. It is a strategic move aimed at extracting energy, attention, or emotional validation, what therapists call narcissistic supply. In these moments, the narcissist is not seeking connection. They are performing a psychological experiment on you, gauging whether your boundaries are malleable enough to bend under pressure. Understanding this dynamic is crucial for victims. When a narcissist escalates, it triggers a complex interplay of emotions in both parties. For the narcissist, the intensity of the push creates a fleeting sense of control and validation. Their fragile ego thrives on bending someone else's behavior to fit their desires. For the victim, the situation can evoke guilt, anxiety, or confusion, often compelling them to justify or negotiate, which is precisely what the narcissist hopes to provoke. Psychologists emphasize that recognizing these interactions as tests rather than genuine requests is key to emotional preservation. Dr. Craig Malkin notes that narcissists operate through repeated behavioral experiments. Every push, guilt-laden remark, or blame-shifting comment is a data point in their ongoing effort to determine how much control they can exert. The strategy for maintaining your power in these moments is deceptively simple but psychologically profound. Hold your position and observe without yielding. This behavioral consistency communicates a clear message to the narcissist that your boundaries are non-negotiable. It transforms the interaction from a chaotic tug-of-war into a controlled environment where your autonomy remains intact. If they back off, it is evidence that your boundary setting is effective and that they recognize, consciously or subconsciously, that their attempts at manipulation are futile. If they persist, pushing harder and attempting to provoke an emotional reaction, the pattern reveals itself unmistakably. This is no ordinary interaction. It is a calculated test of power, a window into the dynamics of narcissistic control. For those seeking to protect themselves, psychologists advise combining awareness with proactive strategies. By understanding the motivations behind the escalation, victims can detach emotionally from the manipulative pressure, responding with calm, behavioral firmness rather than verbal justification or argumentation. This approach not only preserves the victim's energy but also diminishes the narcissist's sense of reward, gradually reducing the likelihood of future manipulations. Dr. McBride highlights that repeated adherence to clear behavioral boundaries trains the narcissist to encounter resistance, which in turn can reduce the intensity of future tests, though they rarely cease entirely. For anyone who has followed along this far, the next step is natural: deeper understanding and practical application. YouTube suggests that the video on the screen here delves further into the strategies for spotting narcissists, avoiding their common traps, and establishing boundaries that are genuinely effective rather than performative. Engaging with this content allows you to see these dynamics in action, equipping you with the tools to protect your emotional resources, secure your autonomy, and build the life you deserve. This is more than guidance. It is a roadmap for reclaiming power in relationships where manipulation and control threaten your well-being, and I'll see you over there to continue this journey.